Today, Ghana woke up to further debate on the unending issue of the payment of judgment debts. The problem seems unending. First, we witnessed the payment of 51.2 million cedis as judgment debt to businessman Alfred Agbeshi Woyome, which opened a can of judgment debt worms all over. From construction pioneers' 94 million euros judgment debt to a potential $1.5 billion claim from African Automobile Limited to the most current Isophoton judgment debt claim of $1.3 million for the abrogation of a contract for a solar rural electrification project. Now, earlier this week, the Accra Metro Assembly AMA faced the grim reality of being kicked out of its offices for its indebtedness to City and Country Waste Limited to the tune of $12 million, of which it has repaid $6 million. It does appear that there is a judgment debt lurking in other sectors. Deputy Information Minister Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwa has said government incurred 642 million Ghana cedis as judgment debts between 2001 and 2011, with breach of contracts constituting majority of these payments. Various reasons, accusations, counter-accusations, and the number of judgment debt beneficiaries have been banded around, creating a very disturbing situation. Tonight on PM Express, we will do a post-mortem of the judgment debt saga Ghana is entangled in. How did the country get here? And what could have been done differently? You can send us your thoughts on facebook.com/MultiTV Ghana and by text 1760 across all networks. We start the discussion with the appearance of former Attorney General Betty Moldedriso before the Parliamentary Accounts Committee and subsequent press conference. With me in the studio tonight to do this discussion are Mr. George Lowe, member of the legal team of Mrs. Idriso, and Michael Quay Jr., a legal practitioner and a member of the MPP. So first of all, he's a member of the NDC. So first of all, Mr. Lowe, can you give us an update of how the discussion at the Public Accounts Committee went and what the press conference sought to achieve?
Well, well, thank you, Brother Steve, and good evening to our wonderful viewers. Yes, we were before the Public Accounts Committee this afternoon as a result of an invitation received by Madam Betty Moldedriso. Basically, they sought to know what she could tell them, or the committee sought to know what she could tell them. And as it were, if you watch it, you find out that the argument as to whether she was speaking in a personal capacity or she was speaking in a capacity as former Attorney General came up to play. But basically, she told them what she knew. And I am of the view that from what the committee itself said, it became clear that a lot of misconceptions have been settled with her appearance today. And if you hear the comments from particularly the chairman, he kept saying that if you had been here earlier and told us all this, probably, you know, some of the things that had been said would not have been said, because Madam Betty Moldedriso made it very clear at the very beginning in what we in law call preliminary objections, that she was not happy about the way the procedure that was adopted by the committee, in that people had made, including the chairman of the committee, had made very serious statements about her person, about her professional competence, and had actually alleged criminality on her part when she had no opportunity, as it were, to answer back at the time. So, well, that is what has transpired. We followed it up with a press conference stating again the fact that Madam Betty Moldedriso did whatever she did in her professional capacity, emboldened by the Constitution of Ghana. The Attorney General hasn't been given specific powers under the Constitution. And we made it very clear that in most cases, she was not even under the control and direction of the executive, you know. So she has done everything as a professional. she's lived up to her professional capability and professional ethics, and that she cannot be faulted for the decisions that she took professionally, and that she's done nothing wrong, and we want to emphasize that part. If she has done nothing wrong as Attorney General of Ghana in paying particularly the CP debt, because indeed she was only being prudent, and that prudence has resulted in her continuing from where the NPP left off. Came to light that the NPP had paid 7.7 million euros, pounds or so in the beginning, had followed up with a warrant signed by Dr. Akoto Osei for 14 million euros to be paid to CP before even the negotiation of the 80 million. So indeed, President Kufuor, everybody, DK Osei and all this had gotten involved in the fray in their attempt to settle. So she did nothing new. She didn't reinvent the wheel. What she did was to further the efforts of the NPP into settling this matter once and for all, particularly when we had an interest component of 12,700 and something euros building up every day. I mean, every single day. And if you are Attorney General sitting by and you saw this happen, to even make it worse, several of Ghana's properties were being attached here and there, being chased. But when we have our gallant soldiers' accounts, the uniform accounts, where they go out there and sweat, being attached for a judgment debt, a debt that the government of Ghana had actually agreed they owe. I mean, what kind of Attorney General will you be when you're sitting by for these things to happen? So indeed, we are saying clearly that Madam Betty Moldidrisu has done nothing wrong, and all this witch hunting and whatever hunting that has been done in the public domain and indeed by the Public Accounts Committee should come to, or should be laid to rest after her presentation to the committee today. We believe that we've made our case and we've made it strongly and well. We are going back on Thursday, and I believe that after Thursday, that matter should die. We should start thinking as Ghanaians, and I believe that we'll come to the part of the program where we'll find out what Ghana wants to do with these kind of things.
So I'll come to you, Michael Quay. Thanks for joining us. Now, earlier today, the Deputy Energy Minister in charge of Power, Inusa Foseini, at a press conference, singled out Professor Michael Quay and former Chief of Staff Kwadwo Mpieni to be blamed for the judgment debt in the case of Isofoten and the State Attorney General. I know that it's fair for your father to be the one to react directly, but what's your thought on this claim?
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and I'd like to say a very good evening to your cherished viewers. Judgment debt. Let me go straight to what you mentioned before I come to the CP issue. We all know that with regard to the Isofoton case, Mr. Kwadwo Mpieni himself said, in conjunction with a directive from the Spanish government, they decided to change the contracts. And in fact, he wrote a letter to the then energy minister, who had come in new, because this had already been done before 2005.
So the then energy minister who...
Yeah, there were energy ministers before him. He came in 2005. That is Professor Michael Quay. And he got this directive, and the letter is there. So in fact, I just spoke to him about it. That, so what is your take on this? So at least I'm well informed. And he said he called Mr. Inusa Foseini and asked him, are you the one who mentioned my name with regard to this? And Mr. Inusa Foseini denied and said, no, I didn't mention your name with regard to this. In fact, we also have all the letters and the directives that were given to you with regard to this contract. So I would want us to clear that air first, so that any mischief that is being attempted, so that there will be equalization, will not help the situation. What are we talking about in this instance? Yes, with the CP, I don't think I'm one of those people who has ever mentioned CP debt. Because to my mind, if something has gone to the arbitration, international arbitration, and it has been held against the government of Ghana that we need to pay a certain amount of money, and the money is negotiated, to be honest, I don't really have a problem with that. Because one thing about business and business entities are that if you get into business engagement, you know, there are times where the government of Ghana will also win debts, judgment debts from companies who have not been able to perform, or who have also breached contracts against the government of Ghana, they also pay to Ghanaians. So if we have breached and there's a problem, I don't think anybody complains. Let us look at, for example, the Hodario Khan case, where during the MPP era, he was apparently dismissed unfairly. He was paid judgment debt. I don't think I've heard anybody say, why was he paid judgment debt? Because he deserved it. The same way Alhaji Yusuf, whose hotel was also broken, pulled down or excavated down by the NDC government. When he was paid compensation, I have not heard anybody on the NDC side or MPP side complain about it. But the issue is, why are people complaining about the isophoton debt? Why are people complaining about the Woyome debt? Why are people complaining about the Galloper debt?
Because I guess the total sum of judgment
it's
debts
not about
in
the
these
total.
areas
It's not about the
are
total
so
sum.
huge. I mean,
No.
if we're thinking
Woyome is
that
not
would
as
be
huge
a
as
burden on the
to me.
on the
Woyome is
taxpayer.
not as huge as CP. Isophoton is 1 million, but people are complaining.
Because the quantum of it is
No.
important.
It's 1 million, $1 million compared to
No,
yeah,
what
over
I
1
mean,
million.
what I mean is that if we consider the fact that within 2001 and 2011 alone, government put out the figure that 642 million
no, it's not like that.
Ghana cedis.
It's between
have been-
2009 to 2011.
And
that
this-
600 has been paid.
And this sum has been paid.
Yes.
That's something we
Well,
taxpayers
so
should worry about.
We should,
isn't
of
it?
course, worry about it. But if we have a genuine debt to pay, there wouldn't have been this brouhaha. The problem we are having at the moment is the debts that we are not supposed to pay, that are being negotiated out of court, where people are sitting in certain areas, faceless people, negotiating deals that we don't owe. That is where the problem is. Let me give you an example. With isophoton, for example, all this noise that is being made, that, oh, why did Kojo Mpieni abrogate and Joe Gate warned him and all of that. Are we also aware that Joe Gate went to court in 2008? That's my legal brother here. Anybody who gives his company an opinion, and the company, for strategical reasons, the business manager can tell you, no, we still want to abrogate it because a lawyer can change his position. And if that same company lawyer takes the other company to court, is he standing on the previous suggestion? No. He took them to court in 2008. The NDC came and continued the court process. It was going well. Then in August 2010, the same NDC government said, we are going to set up a team of lawyers, some of them international, and we will ask, should we pay this isophoton thing? Do we have what we call a breach of contract? So it was set up. Do you know how much these consultants were paid? I don't have a problem with the money because I can't compare. 130,000 euro per report.
I don't have any evidence in front of me.
You don't need it in front of you. I'm saying
that.
it. And as a lawyer, when there's any problem, I'll take the blame myself. 130,000 euro per report. And they brought 4 reports. What is the total? 520,000 euro. That's €500,000. The report came in November. Can you believe that when the same department has set up this body in August, in September, they went and got into settlement to the people? And by the time the report came, after all the money to the experts, you know what the report said? The expert says we should not pay the money because there's no breach of contract and we should go to court.
So really, indeed, what point are you arriving at?
Good. Very, very fantastic. So the point I'm arriving at is, even with the isophoton, the government experts, the government consultants, who they had put together, who they had paid 500 million, advised them, do not pay the money. Go to court because there is no breach. And yet, the government didn't go to court and yet they settled. On what advice? On what opinion did the government still pay that money to isophoton? And then when they ask you, why did you pay the money? Then you go and mention Kojo Mpieni, you go and mention Joe Gate, then you add in Professor Michael Kwe, then you are trying to find a way to dilute the whole irresponsibility that you have taken. My question is, why waste money of Ghana taxpayers' money, 500,000 euro for advice? He knows what it is, legal opinion. If you come and take myself and George Lowe, put us together, go and do good research and pay us 520,000 euro, and we bring you the opinion, and you don't even look at it, and you had paid the money before the opinion even came.
You seem to be creating the impression that all these judgment debt issues started under this government alone.
Oh, no, no. That is very, very false. Because I gave you the impression whereby there have been judgment debts that emanated from NPP, ally. Then I also gave you situations where it was under NDC, ally. Then I told you also that there were no problems because the right procedure was followed and it seemed fair that those wronged people should be given judgment debts. However, in these instances, we are looking at a situation where the government's own consultants, who they paid 500,000, are saying Kojo Mpieni has not done any wrong. He has not breached any contract. He has followed right procedure. So in our opinion to the government, this thing should not go to settlement or to be paid.
Let me ask you, you think we should be concerned about fixing blames rather than finding a lasting solution to the causes, the root causes of these judgment debts?
It's not about fixing blame. It's about government procedure not being followed. It's about processes being ignored. My question is, why did we go and pay money to Isophoton when they did not deserve the money according to our own advice? Because you see, government of Ghana is just like a kingdom. When they say the king is dead, long live the king, i.e., the death of the king does not bring an end to the kingdom. So the death of NPP does not bring an end to government business. But when you yourself employ your own contractors and consultants and they tell you don't pay, how come you have paid? Should we not ask that question? That is very, very serious and very wrong. At the end of the day, the government acts on legal opinion. If at least they had waited for that legal opinion, they would have known that they have to go to court. So Martin Hamidou was telling us that after this happened, he decided that, look, now the next thing we need to do is to prosecute those who went to pay that money in the meantime, because when the settlement was arranged, he as Attorney General knew nothing about it. Can you believe that in Ghana, we have a 1.5 billion galloper deal in court? Attorney General is sitting in his office. The matter was taken out of court to be negotiated, and Attorney General was not involved. $1.5 billion. What is going on? Who are these people behind judgment debt and becoming contractors? We need to know.
Well, we're expecting Dr. Tony Adu. We have on the line Dr. Tony Adu, who is Director of Monitoring and Evaluation at the Presidency. Good evening, sir, and thanks for joining us on PM Express.
Good evening.
You've been following the discussions. May I ask you, what do you think, in your estimation, is the root cause of all these numerous judgment debts we're receiving now?
Well, I would say that there's a great deal of irresponsible conduct on the part of persons who have the responsibility to look after the affairs of this country. From the president down to persons who are engaged as legal advisors, to public servants, and even to the general public. I'm not going to go into the most sensational matter for now, but let's put something into the discussion. You have a public servant, let's say a driver of a government vehicle, who drives recklessly and go and knock a pedestrian down. If the case go to court and judgment is given in favor of the victim, then obviously the driver was guilty of bad driving. Why should the government bear vicarious liability? Why should the government accept vicarious liability? The only condition under which the government is vicariously liable is where you can prove that the accident occurred as a result of inadvertent effect of the discharge of an authorized duty on the part of the driver. But if the driver is found guilty or the victim is awarded this court judgment on the basis of bad driving on the driver, on the part of the driver, the government should not bear liability. But most of these cases have arisen as a result
So,
misconduct.
Dr. Edu, if government should not bear the liability, who then should be bearing the liability?
The driver should. He should, unless he can prove that the accident resulted from an inadvertent situation. That in the course of his authorized discharge of a function, there was a collateral effect. But when you look at most of these cases, you find that this is the case. This is because of general indiscipline in the society that says that, oh, this is government or state resources. It is dispensable.
So what's your own prescription? Right, I'm listening, sir.
You asked the question about causation. So far, causation has not entered the debate, simply because the debate has centered on politicization of the issues. But I think causation also is very, very important, because there is a need, an imperative need, for us to formulate a policy to deal with the management of state resources, especially when gross dereliction of duty leads to indebtedness of on the part of the government, either indebtedness caused by illegal abrogation of contracts and so on and so forth. We need to formulate a policy.
And
For both preventive purposes and I would say that for deterrence. And I think the only way we can do that is to set up an independent public inquiry. There we will deal with the matter of causation. We will deal with the impact of the situations that have been created. And we will then also be able to deal with how do we manage the situation when it has gone to court and we have entered an inevitable area of indebtedness. We need a holistic policy to deal with it, and I think an independent public inquiry would probably, or indeed I believe, would certainly be of help.
Well, Dr. Edu, I'll hold you on there. I'll come back into the studio to you, Mr. George Lowe. You heard Dr. Edu suggesting that an independent inquiry is the way forward in dealing with this. Do you share his view?
Well, it's one of the various views that I don't believe that Dr. Edu is even the first person pushing this angle. Well, when there are issues, I believe that once you look at the totality of it, it helps you, learn to move forward. So in that vein, I think that if, from what Dr. Edu is saying, I want to agree that possibly would need to have the whole discussion by probably a commission, as he suggests, so that there are new guidelines, there are new ways of thinking, there are new ways of doing things, and then we all fashion out the way we should go as a nation. If like Dr. Edu said in part, or from what I gleaned from what he said, if at the beginning of the argument, we had looked at it as a national problem, I'm sure we would not be where we are today. It's because we started by looking at it as a political game plan, where one side of the political divide decides that, look, we got them where we want them.
You think that's what it looks
that
like?
That is it, yes.
Game plan.
Yes, one says we got them where
one says you are responsible.
One says, look,
fix the
you are
problem.
responsible. So then we lose the fine points in the whole argument, and then we lose the whole idea of how do we fix it.
Wanted to react to something Dr. Tony Edu said.
Oh, not particularly, just the same thing, just as George also spoke. There was something that Mr. Tony Edu talked about, which I totally agree with. And he talked about, in terms of judgment debt, management of state resources is also the bottom line. That is what we need to look at. And that is why I keep giving the example that if, supposing Mr. Hodayokai has been treated unfairly, his judgment debt was paid, there was no complaint. Let's say he was given $1 million. But instead of $1 million, there's an attempt by the state officials at that time to give him $3 million. And in some cases even, he has no case, but they want to give him $5 million. We'll all complain. whether you are MPP or NDC. If there's an attempt for Alhaji Yusuf, instead of being paid around $6 million for his hotel, then we see that they want to pay him $24 million, despite the fact that he may be entitled. This is the problem. So at that point, someone should not come and say, oh, but you pay the judgment debt to Mr. Hudariokai, so why not pay to this other man 24 million? So it is about the management of state resources. And we are seeing that some state officials, and he gave a very good list, some civil servants, some people in our country are trying to use judgment debt as contract to make money. And that is where we need to tackle the problem.
Now tell me what the law says about judgment debts.
The law doesn't particularly say anything about judgment debt. What the law says is when you go to court and you lose, you pay. If you go to court and you're supposed to pay and you don't pay, it can increase. As a lawyer, he knows. Their clients, sometimes you even advise them to pay, they don't want to pay. The Ministry of Finance will be telling you, look, I want to pay the money, but because of school feeding program, I can't give the money. Or, look, I owe you 80 million euros, but because of NHIS, I can't give you 80 million. I would rather give you a staggered amount, i.e. every 3 months, I'll pay this amount so that the children in Ghana can also eat. There are various ways of handling the judgment debt saga. But when you hear a scenario where, for example, a minister of state, deputy minister of state, Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa, picks a telephone, pleading with Attorney General that please, oh, Asofotel's money, please pay it to them. Then you're going to ask the question. You are a minister of information. The Attorney General is doing his job. Whether you pay or not, he will look at the issues. He will decide to go to court. He will decide to settle. No problem with that. If he settles proper, no problem. Why are you Minister of Information, deputy, picking phone, trying to influence his decision by pleading on somebody's behalf? Petition or no petition? Then that's when people start to ask, what is your interest? Is it personal? Maybe it's a guy, your friend, your classmate, and so you are trying to influence the process. Is it financial? Maybe you are going to get a cut or what is famously called a bond. You are going to get something in your back pocket, so you want to push that agenda. If we can't ask these questions, then we are joking as a country. So we need to ask, Mr. Okudzeto Ablakwa, what informed you? What inspired you to call Mr. Martin Hamidou to give Isofotel their money? And why not ask the same thing for Oyume? Or why not ask the same thing for CP? Why Isofotel? We need to ask these questions for the country to move forward.
Now, Mr. Lowe, in the specific instance of the Isofotel case, Isofotel raised concerns in its statement of claim that the Agric Ministry terminated a contract by not going through the appropriate tendering process, although it had informed them that they were going to go through the tendering process. Eventually, they claimed that the government resorted to sole sourcing and gave the contract to another Spanish firm, Elecna. Do you not see that underlying all these things are inability of the relevant authorities to do due diligence in contract issues and abrogation?
Thank you very much, Steve. Let me first start by saying that I'm shocked, I'm surprised by my brother Mike's reference to Okudzeto Ablakwa and its attendant supposed telephone call.
I didn't refer to it.
Please.
It was Martin Hamidou.
Please. And I'm saying that from where I sit, he's a lawyer. I would rather we get the facts right and we get the evidence correct.
And what are the facts and what are the correct
What I'm saying is that Martin Hamidou has come to say things, and he said a lot of things across board. From where I sit, sincerely,
most of them cannot be substantiated.
None of them can.
Okudzeto has
Please,
admitted
oh,
on
please,
Joy FM
please, please,
that
please.
yes, he did
Please,
call him
please,
about the debt.
Please.
No, don't tell the story.
Please. From where I sit, I would rather we have a full-scale investigation and the matter is the facts are properly laid out. I don't want to sit on TV and because I've heard somebody say something, then I take it as gospel truth and then I go out there. In any case, without admitting that such a thing happened, what is wrong if it came to a notice of a colleague minister that somebody is owed money and he calls the Attorney General and finds out what is the state of that matter? What has anybody gone wrong? Don't we do it all the time?
You and who?
Don't we do it all the time? Can't I call him about something, a third party who has just told me that probably...
Unless I have an interest, I won't call.
No. Sometimes you have the whole nation's integrity at heart, and sometimes you think that this is not an issue. And I mean, you see, when we are talking about all these judgment debt things, let's come back to your question about the statement of claim. You see, from where I sit, and from the document, unfortunately, like I told you, I didn't know that we're coming to discuss from the document I have cited, even the Spanish government wrote to complain about the fact that, one, what Mr. Mpienu and the president were doing by giving the contract to another was not fair, was not right. Two, indeed, when Mr. Mpienu wrote the letter, Mr. Clement Eledi, who was Deputy Minister of Agric, wrote back and told him that, Master, one, this is a phase 2 of a project. Isofoton has done a phase 1. They are the ones we know are capable of doing the project. The company that you've brought
But
in...
the phase 1 was a pilot project.
Yes. I'm saying that the company you are referring to us, we don't even know them. We've already agreed with Isofoton to do the project. So what if you insist on changing it, it's going to have dire consequences for us. Joe Garte firmed that position up by warning them that when they go for breach of contract, they are going to get around a square. And it has happened. So for anybody to come and embellish the whole matter and say this and that and that and that, it's not what we do. We need to be truthful to ourselves in this country. He's talking about 1 million, 1.2. We are saying that, look at some of the figures. Somewhere as low as 450. If you go back to CP, what we are talking about is that when the NDC government, when the NPP government came, reconciliation was done, everything was done. The Ministry of Roads and Transport came and confirmed that there are 3 projects. We are not contesting them because everything shows that the work has been done. And for almost 10 years, debt that you've accepted, that I owe. So what business did you have not to pay? And that is where the irresponsibility and negligence comes in. It's not somebody who came and did what? At the end of it, try to cut it or put a cap on it at the point. We are saying that, you see, like the information I was put out, most of our debts are just about breach of contract. You come, you are a new government, you see one particular government seems to be doing business with a particular company. You don't like their face. Probably your thinking is that maybe they even financed their campaign in the past, so you won't pay, even when you owe them. It happened with the Gallopers case. The point I'm trying to make is that we must all decide as a nation in the continuum. And Dr. Tonedu makes a beautiful point he talks about. Sometimes we are only talking about politicians. Even civil servants, they have their role to play. And I agree with my brother when he talks about, so we need to learn to manage the debt. One of the things that worries me even in this country, and where I would also have a problem with that, sometimes we even forget the fine figures. Go back and do a content analysis of our contractors that we owe in this country. What is their crime? They've done projects for us. But then for one reason or the other, we keep postponing the debt.
The point I was seeking to establish was that I made reference to the Isofoton issues, specifically, and their claims that government wrongly abrogated the contract with them, and I asked you, whether you feel that these, we need sufficient due diligence to analyze contracts to save us.
No, that is what I'm saying.
These kinds of losses.
What is due diligence? What is due diligence? Here is a case where a company has done a pilot project as a phase 1. We've gone ahead, ministry have gone ahead to agree with them to continue and do the phase 2. You understand? Out of the blue, somebody from the president's office decides that, no, I don't like their face, let's change them. And even when the country of origin, the Spanish government complained, we still went ahead and gave them. So wherein lies the due diligence? It is somebody's
I'll go back
responsibility.
onto the line and speak
somebody's
with,
irresponsibility. There's nothing about due diligence.
Dr. Tony Edo. Good evening, sir, and thanks for still staying with us. You made suggestions on how we can approach this and depoliticize it. Let me ask you, is the presidency concerned about the trend of judgment deaths in the media now and in the courts?
The presidency has always been concerned with the phenomenon of judgment. That's why, right from the beginning, as far back as 2009, part of the financial management policy was to look into the nature and effect of the judgment debt and arrest their impact. Before I come to the issue of finding a lasting solution, I must say that I have some reservations also regarding the presentation made by the See, this is the other dimension of the politicization of the issue. This dimension I will call the blame game, where the various political parties see it as an opportunity to put the other party online. Mr. Michael Quay started by saying that there appears to be a conspiracy whereby some individuals see an opportunity to use judgment debt, operate it as an industry. And immediately after that statement, he jumps onto the opposite. Seriously, this is very unfair, because at best, what Mr. Martin Amidu has said and what Mr. Okujeto Ablakwa has said are hearsay. One man's word against the other. And this afternoon, I listened to Okujeto Ablakwa, and he said his contact with Martin Amidu was in terms of a written communication, and he is prepared to make that written communication available to the public. Asamoah Boateng came and immediately jumped on Okujeto Ablakwa and even called him corrupt, a whole series of things. This was on Peace FM. And when the interviewer asked Asamoah Boateng to stay on the line because Okujeto Ablakwa wanted to, he said, I don't want to talk to you. The same thing is happening at the Public Accounts Committee meeting, which has been turned into an inquisition, where members of parliament have called the former Attorney General, Betty Moses, as corrupt. This is unacceptable. The other dimension, which is at the heart of causation, that is the other dimension of politicization, which is at the heart of causation, is political vindictiveness, where a political party comes to power and targets persons that it believes are more or less friends or activists or sympathizers of previous political party, and therefore they will go out and destroy their business or contracts that they have more or less been awarded by the previous political party will not be on it. And there are several evidential cases of this. This we need to deal with as part of formulating a policy for dealing with this debt menace.
Now, Dr. Edu, before
I'm coming. Should incoming political parties which come into office be allowed to treat state resources and the organs of state as if it is their private property, to do what they like with it, to the point of abrogating contracts and sacking people, with the effect that these people will then look to the law for remedy, and the consequence of that remedy is indebtedness to the state and more or less judgment debts that develop as molehills into mountains. This is a principal policy question. Two, where we have found that the act or inaction of a party in power lies at the root cause of a government debt, what should we do? In this country, people have gone to prison for gross dereliction of duty or charges that were brought against them as gross dereliction of. George Sipayanki was a legal advisor at the Ministry of Finance. He was implicated in the quality grain affair, that he was in a position to have advised the government. Because he did not advise the government, he was part and parcel of a conspiracy.
Dr. Edu, I'm sorry, we don't have enough time on our hands. So
yes,
quickly,
okay.
I need to quickly ask you my final question. That Cabinet has issued...
Well, but you've got the points I've made so far.
I have, sir. And I'm moving on to ask you that Cabinet has issued a 10 million debt ceiling. Could this be the answer to reducing this whole judgment debt problem?
No, that cannot be the answer. That is only a palliative. What we need is a real concrete solution. Like I said, I keep mentioning the word causation. We need to stop the causes of judgment debt.
We need to stop the causes of judgment debts. Thank you very much, Dr. Tony Edu, for your time on PM Express. Now let's come back to the studio.
This thing, let me just say a few things. I think Dr. Tony Edu has dealt very well with the judgment debt issue, but he's dealt with it from one angle, because there are two things.
You think he's dealing with it from the angle
when
of
it
the
comes to
NDC
judgment debt
and government.
Yeah, there are two things when it comes to judgment debt.
Is it not the same politicization he has been talking about?
Judgment debt, you need to look at the causes. That is something that you can do afterwards. And then we can have a certain criteria of how things should be done. For example, what is a standard contract? What is this behavior? If it's going to be cancelled, this is the process. That one, we can deal with it administratively. That is an issue. And that is a very good suggestion he made. However, we need to look at the issues of corruption when it comes to judgment debt.
And that cannot be dealt with
Yes, we need to look at
administratively.
inflation of the prices of how we negotiate these things. We need to look at favoritism. And that is why I was saying that, look, what Mr. Okujeto Ablakwa and Mr. Hamidu are talking about. Please, what are we saying that there's no evidence? Evidence is corroboration. They are both lawyers. You know what is corroborated evidence. Mr. Hamidu said you called him, Mr. Okujeto Ablakwa, to ask him to pay the money for Isofotel. When they called Mr. Okujeto Ablakwa and asked him, he corroborated it.
That he called?
Yes, that he called Martin Hamidu with regard to the Isofotel issue. So why I'm not the one making the story. The issue is between the two of them. They have mentioned this to us, and as Ghanaians, we are listening from outside. These days, a lot seems to be happening within the NDC. They tell us stories from inside, and then we on the outside, we're like, whoa, wow, did this really happen? And the question here is this: why the favoritism on the Isofotel case?